Hey, thanks for listening to our podcast. If you want to listen live in the central Indiana area, you can hear us on 93.5 FM and 107.5 FM. And on the Andy Moore Automotive Group hotline, he is Rick Venturi. Not a lot of bright lights in yesterday's performance Rick.
No, John, there's no question about it. That one is very hard to swallow. Frank owned it right away. I mean, this was a top-to-bottom failure. Probably not as big a shock to me, although I thought we were the better team and that we would come out the victor. But I said some things to you during the week, and certainly on Sunday morning when we do the pregame, and I said that the number one thing that the Raiders had going is they didn't have the talent we had. But the thing to beware of was that in Gruden they had a guy who really can carve you up. A guy who understands this system. He coached within it for years back in the 2000s. He basically carved us up a year ago. The only difference was we were able to get 42. We were able to get 14 in the fourth quarter, but he really carved us up a year ago as well. So, I knew that there was a danger in that respect. I didn't think it would probably go this way. But it's very difficult when in this league, they're all hard to win, but it's tougher when you lose to what I consider a bottom 25% team. I mean, the fact that he came in here and did that without a very good football team, and I've even said it to him today, it really was one of his finest hours, honestly, in coaching to be able to do that, which doesn't make us feel any better, but it really is what it is. I think and I said this to you and Joe Sunday morning, if you remember, I said they had one chance and one chance only to win this game, and that was to jump on us early, establish a lead, gain confidence that was fragile, that was ready to break after 6 terrible quarters, and control the time of possession with the ball, with control passing, mixes of runs. I didn't ever think they would be that successful running. I thought perhaps they would passing because they were a year ago, make a handful of plays on defense, a handful of tackles for losses, shorten the game, and hold on and win it. And, that's what they were. Unfortunately, that game plan was exactly what unfolded. They just totally dominated that first quarter into the 16-minute mark of the game with 21 points. I mean, the 7 we got, really, with the turnover, they just dropped the ball. I mean,
That's
they just
it.
dropped
Yep.
the handoff, and, Mac took the run down in there. We got the boot pass, and then they came right back and drove it on us again and really mixed it up. I don't know if you're aware of it. I think I may have hollered at you, but over a 36-minute period from the halftime of Atlanta until the 16th minute of that game, the Indianapolis Colts had 30 of 31 passes completed on them, which is, that's football malpractice at some point. I mean, you just can't. I mean, that's just unbelievable. And that's how you get possessed. And then while they're doing that, you start to try to play more cover two, and they're running all those stunts because they can't take anybody on defense. And all of a sudden, that offense starts rolling on that running game, and that was really amazing. And then he stole a touchdown with that reverse. I have to laugh. I mean, Banagoo, he still doesn't know where that play is. I mean, we gave up a 60-yard touchdown, but I bet nobody got a loaf on that play. So, because we were all running.
Everybody's running really hard, is what you're saying.
We spend so much time on that instead of good sound football and knowing who has the contain, who has the force on a play like that. Because
I kept thinking about your defensive conversation with me last week at this time, and it seemed like that it only got worse, especially early. Rick, I honestly put it this. I thought that yesterday, early in those first couple of possessions by the Raiders, it was like akin to how the Colts and Frank Reich and Nick Sirianni tied up the Falcons defense last week in that first half. And it seemed like the Colts have no answers. Is that more about what Gruden was doing or more about what Eberflus isn't doing?
Well, I've been on this theme for a long time because I coached obviously defense for 27 years. And my first year, my rookie season in 1982, I broke in with one of the great coordinators of all times, the great late Bud Carson, who was a part of Chuck Noll and the Steel Curtain. I got him late in his career. He had some personal issues, but his mind was great. He taught me the game, and he had brought 3 college coaches. He was the NFL experienced guys, and 3 of us, myself, Gunther Cunningham, Bob Belisani, all came out of the college ranks. And Bud's system was complex, and it was man-to-man derivatives and check with me's, and you had to know where everybody else, and it was difficult. It was uncomfortable for us coming out of college. And one time we had a bad game, and we were begging, we were lobbying that we would play this area zone that was more of a comfort zone for us. We could, if we could just play a little bit more area zone. And I'll never forget what he said to me. He said, "Son, let me tell you something. You play that area zone in this league," and he just didn't say area zone. He had a couple bleeps with it. He said, "You play that area zone in this league, what you're going to do is you're going to watch that quarterback complete about 1 million balls." And I think that's really the beginning of our problem. I think we have other problems. I think we're constructed just like Ballard and Eberfloss likes, which is on speed and simplicity. But the problem is we can't take anybody on. We have to stunt to stop the run, and people have figured out. So what they do is they wall those defensive linemen. They get right up on the second level, boom, and they've got it because we're light. But the coverage scheme really affects everything we do because people come out. We're very predictable, totally predictable in what we're going to do. We don't do anything to match coverages, so guys are running free into the zones. When we play man, we don't play it very well at the corners. We don't do a very good job. I've pointed out to you in training camp, corners play with their hands down. They never get a piece of anybody on the line, so they get beat on release. Also, they'll show the coverage most of the time. If you see Carr out there yelling, "Kill, kill, kill," what he's doing is John's gotten into a formation which letting him check. So the play that he had called, he looks at that defense and he sees it's already aligned, and he checks to something else. And there were a lot of plays that were like that on Sunday that were just obviously, check with me's perfect play for the defense because, A, it's predictable, two, when you show it like they show it, that even makes it more easy to handle. Now, the other thing that happens with the zone, because all I hear now is our pass rush is no good. Our pass rush is no good. And admittedly, numerically, in the last 2 weeks, it isn't very good. But here's the deal, John. Your pass rush and your coverages, and this is something that most people don't understand totally because there's a lot of nuances in coverages. You can play zone, but it can be a tight matchup zone like you play in basketball, or it can be a sit back in the area and try to break on the quarterback, which just doesn't work. It can be used as a changeup. And the reason I say that is here's what's happening. When you're playing a guy like, Ryan, and then you come with John Gruden, those are quick rhythm guys. Those are guys that are going to get the ball off in a quick amount of time. And you know that going in. I mean, that's something you see on film. You know that. I mean, historically, you know what these guys are doing. So when you play a team like that, in order to get the pass rush, the coverage has to do the job first. And what you have to do is disrupt and match and close people off in what we call the first and second level. You've got to close people off in that first phase of the route. Because then when the five-step drop isn't there, what does the quarterback have to do? Then he has to choke it down. And if he has to choke it down, then you've bought the time for the defensive line to get there. Now, I'm not exonerating the defensive line. They're not playing very well, and they were really bad against the run, to be honest with you. Terrible. But I'm telling you that the coverage, when people come in here, they know exactly what they're going to get. They have free access into that secondary. They got free access into that second level. I've been saying this forever. I had to laugh. I was so frustrated when I finished that game. I went out on my motorcycle, and I do have a Gullwing with a radio in it. So I couldn't resist. I turned it on and listened to two of my favorite guys, Rake and Barry, just two of my absolute favorites. And a guy called in and he meant well. He was trying to make an excuse. He goes, I was with my son today and I watched that first quarter and that just wasn't us on defense. And I wanted to say, you know what? If you look at the last 5 games, Kansas City, okay, Los Angeles Chargers, okay, will take the Titans out because they can't throw against me. Then you go to Atlanta with a good quarterback, and then you go this week with a good coach and a decent quarterback. And we haven't stopped anything in those 4 games out of 5. So in some respects, that's exactly who we are. And I think until we face that and get rid of this ridiculous stubbornness and stop playing this 5 p.m. coverage. You know what we in my world we call it a 5 p.m. Defense, because we feel like when you play those coverages over and over every week, a coaching staff can go home at 5 p.m. because there's no strategy involved. And, that's what I see week in and week out. And that's just a starting point, and that gets you started. And that 6 for 6 on that first drive just got them going. It just got them going. And
Yep.
the one thing that they needed to do was get going. This was a team that had just been demolished for 6.5 quarters. They were on the fringe. This is a historically bad defense that cannot rush the passer. I mean, it absolutely couldn't rush it if you played 8 quarters. You know what I'm saying? And basically they were able to get up, get the momentum, and then at the end of the day, because even though somebody was praising us, but we gave up a 9-minute drive in the third quarter, and the only reason it wasn't 7 was that Terrell Williams dropped the ball on the slant in the end zone. He just dropped it, flat drop it. That was a pregame warm-up that he did basically dropped, or they'd have put that game away right there. And that was a 9-minute drive. So at the end of the day, exactly what I worried about when I told you there was one way to win this game ended up coming to fruition. We ended up losing the time of possession by 7 minutes. 7 minutes. And, if you go back to Kansas City, now we got them coming up. It's a different world, different game. But they held the ball for 39 minutes in that playoff game. So that's 18-minute differential. So, I think at some point we're going to have to come to grips with this, and we're going to have to make some changes. I mean, we can't change philosophically everything we're doing because we've drafted for it. But, I said this too, and when you look at the running game, I said this, we have a team that can play to the ball really well. In other words, if you're just running in a straight line, we can run stuff down, but we can't play through and to. You look at all our linebackers, they're all athletic, they're long, they're all this and all that, and not one of them can take on a block. They can't take on a block. And the same thing was true of our front. Our nose tackles were ridiculous. I mean, Hunt was nowhere, and Stewart was worse. Absolutely. That center Hudson, who's very good, he just ate them alive. So any time they ran into the bubble, they got right up on the linebackers and just impaled them. I mean, one of the plays, not on the last drive that they iced it, but the one before that was a 1st and 15, and we needed to get them stopped, and they hit a 15-yard gain, remember, to our left. They ran the ball to Jacobs. He ran a sweep to the left. And former Colt, Denzel Good, comes out, and he sends Walker back to Northwestern and sends Okereke back to Stanford on one play. I mean, and the guy gets 15 yards on a 1st and 15 just when you need to get him backed up and get the ball back quickly. So, that was a really disappointing, day, 377 to that team. And then, the reverse, that's just unsound football. I mean, are we running to the ball? Did we get any loafs? Probably not. But we just gave up 60 yards because we're not sound. We're not technically sound. We run around good, but we're not technically sound. And it's amazing to me when you play so few defenses that you can be that unsound.
So, Rick Venturi, it's the segments you have to hear each and every week. And I got a little bit of a wrinkle. I think we're going to add some calls if you guys want to call in coming up here after 5 o'clock. I tell you what, let's take a break right now. But I want you to think about this because I've been asked this a number of times. To you, what is the difference besides the players that are out defensively right now and the way this defense is playing so far this year, or especially the last 2 games, for example, compared to the team defensively we saw late in the regular season a year ago? Is that cool? Are you good with that?
I got it.
All right, Rick. I'm going to put you on hold, and we'll come back with that. Rick Venturi, you got to hear it each and every Monday right here on 93.5 and 107.5 FM, The Fan. Rick is back on a Monday where you got to listen. And some calls maybe after 5, too. The reaction to the Colts losing at home yesterday to the Raiders. All right, I asked this question as a tease before we went to a break. The big difference that you see between the defense that was making strides, especially at the end of the regular season a year ago, that has been struggling, especially in the last 2 weeks that we see.
Well, I think in some ways, and I alluded to that in the offseason, there was a little bit of fool's gold with that. In that 10-game stretch, if you go back in the early part of the season, there were 3 games with Sam Darnold and Derek Carr and Tom Brady where we lost 2 out of 3. Could have easily lost that one, and we were giving up monumental passing yardage. I think the percentage was 80% in those 3 games. I mean, and all those teams they start out the game. I think at one time Carr was 17 for 17. I think Brady was 17 for 18. I mean, just kind of like what we see. And then, basically we got the Buffaloes. We got a bunch really that in that 10-game run offensively, we really played a bunch of clunkers. Let's face it, we played some of the worst quarterbacks and concepts in the league. Now, albeit you can only be as good as who you have to play. But what happened is I think basically if you don't have teams that are going to come out and establish the pass and loosen you up and attack those zones and get you on the heels and then run it like John did Sunday, he came right out that first series. It was just boom, 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 throw it with one run mixed in there, and pretty soon they had a touchdown. But what I said in the offseason, and I said all preseason, is that this is going to be a different year. This is going to be a test now of the scheme, because when you go back and you look at the 2 teams that are premier offensive teams last year, and I've pointed this out a million times, I'm not coming up with this today, is in the New England and Kansas City game, the 2 teams that you have to play with, we gave up a ton of 61 points. We gave up 900 yards, 600 yards passing, and 300 yards rushing. So, in reality, which one were you? The team that played against, Blaine Gabbert, or the team that played against those 2 teams? Because in those 2 games, we absolutely were awful. 39 minutes of ball control by Kansas City in the playoffs. So my statement was, now this year you're going to look at a lot of different kinds of offenses with better quarterbacks. And so if you really look at what's been happening lately, this is a little bit more like we are. And the pass percentage is just overwhelming. I mean, this, 30 of 31, like I said, you can't do that. You and I could play catch 31 times and we drop 2. I mean, it's just unbelievable and staggering. And I think what it does is it puts us on our heels, and all of a sudden nothing else is very good. And then, we have, in order to play cover 2, we have to what we call pirate and jam. We have to move those defensive linemen, which also takes away from their rush because of their run stunts. We know we can't hold up inside with those linebackers, and so we're in a little bit of a mess right now. Now, again, when you play Kansas City, you can't play Kansas City like you play John Gruden, even though Andy and John shared an office for years with Mike Holmgren. They've evolved different ways, and and because of the quarterback and how Kansas City plays, you have to have a specific game plan for them. And that's my other criticism. I don't ever see a specific game plan. I see the same defenses, whether it's game 1, game 8, game 16, and we just kept saying we have to take better angles, tackle better, and all that, and we have to compete better. Compete better, yeah, but compete is not a strategy. It's an optimum effort that you want and that you hope to get. But what you got to have is a strategy to put them in the right spots to win.
So Rick Venturi with us. Quick break and we'll come back. I want to get your thoughts on how you thought the offense played, what might happen if Marlon Mack can't give it a go on Sunday night as well because he missed a large part of that game yesterday, and the overall play of Jacoby Brissett, which I've been talking about so far before you came on this show. So, Rick, I'm going to put you on hold. We'll come back, and maybe some phone calls will work in after 5 o'clock with Rick Venturi right here for you to hear the day after on 93.5 and 107.5 FM, The Fan. Rick is back after 5. Let's go ahead and log it in. We might even do some calls here later on this hour if you guys dig it at 239-1070. We'll be all over it. If you guys want to call in, we can. Colts Roundtable Live later on tonight. That is Frank Reich taking your questions via Twitter. That's Matt Taylor, the voice of the Colts. Jim Sorgi, and I think Joe Wrights is also going to be a part of that later on tonight at 6 o'clock. Colts Roundtable Live right here on 93.5 and 107.5 FM, The Fan. Back to Rick. Rick Venturi's been going over yesterday's really bad loss to the Raiders at home by the Colts. We've been talking a lot about the defense and their shortcomings. Let's shift gears to the offense. The running game where it was yesterday and the play of the quarterback. What'd you think?
Yeah, well, first of all, I think things that have been chronicled killed us. We got off to a horrific start, 2 punts to start the game. Absolutely, they slash in there, throw us for a loss, make a good play underneath. Must have read the formation. I don't know. Must have read the position of the weak back and somehow got that slant into the backfield. We have two punts to start the game, and then they score. But then they got 14 points, so it's like 14-0 right there. Obviously, the drops were horrendous. We just could never. We were never in control like we have been in other games, where you just felt like that you were gonna make it. We were never in sync. Frank uses the term rhythm. I think that's good. We never could have a sustained rhythm. The drops made a big difference. You get a key 3rd and 5, you're gonna make a first down, you drop the ball. We didn't have a million penalties. Obviously, the Raiders had 10, and I think we had 5. But our penalties were, again, momentum killers. Blocks in the back on a play, a holding penalty on our right side of our offensive line. It was an ineligible receiver downfield. It was always something that set us behind. Now, a couple things that I thought were killers is they did a good job of shooting people because they don't have a good defense at all. But they were able to make 7 tackles for losses, and those tackles for losses got us behind the count. I mean, the one, obviously, to start the game that everybody's talking about, the slant underneath Smitty, who had no chance on that play. The bigger one is Joyner's blitz up the A gap in the red zone, and I want to get to that in a minute. But those kinds of plays that set us back in the count killed us. We just weren't in sync totally. I think the other thing that killed us are the 2 red zone. I would say the 2 red zone FUBARs. Okay, the first one obviously is Campbell fumbling the ball. Campbell's running down there. We're in great shape. We're going in to score. Boom, he fumbles the ball. Great strip by Crosby, the young kid who was a Morse Reservoir All-Star from Eastern Michigan. Looked like Ted Hendricks yesterday, to be honest with you. But that was
you talking about Crosby?
Crosby.
I thought the same thing. Ted Hendricks.
Remember, he was one of our Morse Reservoir All-Stars out of Eastern Michigan. But he came across, made a great play on that. But Campbell's got to hold on the ball, so we lose a potential 7, and then we're down there 2nd and goal on the 6. And Joyner, we motion. Joyner comes to the middle. I don't know if he did it on his own. I really don't think it was called. And he shot that A gap, and he hit us for that 7-yard loss. And then we had to settle for a check down. And so 2 trips there to the red zone where we could have had 14. Really, realistically, we're 1st and goal on the 6th the one time. We're going to be first down with Campbell's play. All of a sudden, we get 3 points out of that. So we leave 11 on the board right there. No question about that. And then, in the end, it's 2 turnovers, and this relates I think to Jacoby in a sense, in that we have two, serious turnovers. The one I already talked about is Campbell's turnover, which really takes a potential touchdown away from us. And then Jacoby, who I thought battled all day, I agree with Frank for most of the day. He battled. And remember now, and I said this, they played us a lot more like Tennessee played us. They got up and pressed us. They made it a lot harder. When you look at his numbers, he's 24 for 46. He's just barely over 50%, with a 46.3 QBR. But, at the end of the day, that's a real bad. That's a turnover that kills you. Despite all the negatives, and I told you, I texted you during the game. I said Oakland's defense will not hang on if we just stop them and we just keep grinding. They will not hang on. And the game gets down to a one possession game, and he misreads that coverage, and he throws that interception for 6. And so, even though I think for the most part in that game he played pretty well, he got out of trouble, made a couple key scrambles, but at the end of the day, that ball comes out of your hand at crunch time, and it's a pick 6. And what he did on that, the Raiders were in man-to-man. They showed it. They were up in press, and the strong safety was down on the tight end. And when our tight end went across, and then the receiver runs the dig behind him, what the Raiders did, which is a little bit unusual for them, they played what we call a one funnel. In other words, the strong safety didn't go down there and run. Harris didn't run with the tight end. He passed him off, and they played 3-on-2. But it looked to Brissett on the first read like he was going to take him in there, which is the normal operation. But he just read it fast and felt like he was going to have that dig one-on-one, and he didn't see the rest of the play. He didn't, you won't see it, but you have to sense that guy coming off, and he threw that strike to Harris, and really that was, although it still was interesting at the end, but at that point, that really made it a mountain to climb after that one.
Was that really, to you, the first gauge to see, all right, because here's how I explained it earlier. I thought for the first time all year, for the most part, we saw Jacoby incredibly uncomfortable. And I thought the Raiders made him uncomfortable most of the day, but especially late. At some points of the season, we know it's going to fall on his shoulders to make plays like that. Is that the first experience you have seen with Jacoby in that situation, and how do you gauge it?
I think that's fair. And yet I don't think it's necessarily an indictment. I don't think if it keeps going, it's a trend. But he's played pretty doggone good in fourth quarters. He's led us back in there. He's
been pretty comfortable in those situations. He wasn't yesterday, though.
Yeah, absolutely. He makes 2 great throws in the San Diego game in that long drive that we go back to. That he makes a 4th and 2 shot. It's not like he has failed in the fourth quarter. He made a bad play, and I think he was uncomfortable because I think we struggle on offense when teams get up and press us. And Tennessee, in that second half, began to do that more and more. Teams that play off us, we just seem to just absolutely destroy. But when teams get up and press us, and I think a couple things that are really troublesome is that when you look at our 2 hotshot young receivers who at this point now should be performing, I think you have 5 catches between Kane and Campbell. I think you have 5 for 25 yards. You've got 2 drops, and you got a fumble. So, that production, particularly if T.Y. is going to miss ball, and this looks to me like it's going to be something that's going to linger. He's going to come back, then he's going to redo it. This looks to me like it's going to be a lingerer. And, you got those 2 guys have to come through. They have to come through. You can't, at the end of the day, when you get a press game, you can't end up with 5 catches between the 2 of them, 25 yards. Because, again, just like on offense, just like on our defense, this is a copycat league. And the more people see that, the more they're going to do it. And I think Kansas City will do that. They got a really good corner in Breland, and I will be shocked if they don't do it.
Well, I'd agree with you on that, too. See, it's funny. I kind of take your thought on Jacoby's game. There were times when he thought, yeah, you know what, everything's going okay, but then he just, to me, that's why both Nick and Frank making him as comfortable as possible through these first three games has been such an advantage for him. But without that running game and with a lot more pressure than I can remember through the first three games, it made it a lot tougher, especially late for him yesterday.
John, now,
and the drops in too. Exactly.
I mean, critical drops
Sure.
that, and again, I agree with you. I don't know that it wasn't just indicative of the whole operation. You're right. They were uncomfortable. You were never in control of that game. Never. There's other games where you feel like, we're going to win this, and I felt like we could win it even, until up to the interception, because I just felt like that the Oakland defense at that point was just hanging on. I mean, they were just hanging on, and they were hoping for a play, and damned if they didn't get one.
So Rick Venturi via the Andy Moore Automotive Group hotline right now. We said we're going to take a couple calls. You don't mind here? You're all right?
No, let's go.
I want to take one because we're talking about the quarterback situation and the offense here with the Colts before we dive in to the Chiefs coming up on Sunday night. And Tom is at 239-1070. You're on with Rick Venturi. Tom, go ahead.
Yeah, the question I have is why it would seem to me that by now that Brissett would be looking off receivers more than he is. I happen to be sitting right in direct line with the cornerback and the receiver and he never looked off the receiver the whole time. And I think the cornerback baited him. He didn't get directly in line until he started his throwing motion, and then he just moved over and intercepted it. And you look during the entire game, and Carr was looking off until the last second, and that's one of the reasons his receivers were as open as they were, because our safeties and defensive back couldn't read his eyes, and everybody seems to be receding Brissett. I'll hang up and listen.
Tom, thank you. I would agree that Harris pick six. They didn't look anybody off there.
No, he did not. And I think Tom's question, and I think his observations are right on. I think that is a problem. I think that does generally come with experience. Teams come in here, Tom, and they know we're going to be in zone. So the one thing, and this goes back to the 2000s when that defense was played, is that, basically everybody knows that the linebackers are looking at the quarterback's eyes. So you train your quarterback coming in here to definitely look away, knowing exactly where he's going to go, but always look away so you freeze them. But that is something that Jacoby has got to get better at. He also elongates sometimes on the throw. It's not that he has a long arm delivery, but he has a long body delivery. He definitely did on that one. I don't honestly think that they baited him to that. I just think they fell into that coverage, and he didn't sense, in plays like that, when it's underneath coverage, you have to sense that guy. He read it too quickly. He's got to confirm that that's man-to-man coverage, and he made such a quick read, and he thought he had it. And you're right, he looked it in. A couple of those tip balls, he looks it in. So, yeah, I think Tom is absolutely right on that. I think that is something that comes with experience and confidence, but it's really something that you got to be able to do.
All right, I got a question from Twitter here. Ask Coach Venturi if the corners are good enough and physical enough to play man coverage throughout.
Well, I think you have to. I thought Yasin made a couple really good plays in man-to-man. Wilson was a disaster on that long run. He came across the field, and he looked like he was going for the flag. I thought it was my 8-year-old's flag football. Tackle the guy on the sidelines, and then he gets all turned around. Somebody mentioned today, and I think it was accurate, he's always close, and he never comes up with it. Always close, and he either gets a penalty or something like that. I also think our corners really struggle fundamentally in the way they play man-to-man. I've been saying it for 2 years. They get up in a press position, and I've coached this a lot. I know a little bit about it. I worked for Saban, who's the best of all times in coaching corners. And, you got to get your hands up. You got to get your hands on release. If you get up there and you have your hands down around your knees. Just watch it. I'll tell the fans, just watch it. Go get out your NFL Game Pass. Watch it. Any corner that plays with his hands down there, the first thing that happens is when that release comes up, your hands go down and out. You know, a boxer would never play with his hands down around the knees. And we've been doing it for now a year and 4 games. So it doesn't surprise me. So sometimes our man-to-man will scare you some because we don't do a very good job of it. But if we don't play it and we don't threaten it, they're just picking cherries on you. I'm just telling you. You're just like I told you. This is another little anecdote on that, and I can't help it because I've been venting on this for so long. But I was with Nick Saban at LSU. I was the defensive coordinator at New Orleans at the time, and he invited me down to sit in with he and his defensive staff. And Nick is very, very complex, just like Bud Carson, who I talked about before, and Bill Belichick, very complex in coverage. And so their staff was uncomfortable with it too, because it's a lot easier as a coaching staff just to coach those basic zones and say it's on the players. It's a lot tougher to have to coach a lot of derivatives and matchups and things like that. And so his coaches were lobbying him that day, and they were saying, Nick, can't we just line up and play this cover 3 and this cover 2 Tampa 2? And I'll never forget, Nick looked at him and said, boys, if you put that crap in here, he said, I can't help you today, and I damn sure not going to be able to help you on Saturday because you just don't have the answers, is my point.
Yeah,
so,
no
you
doubt.
know, but I think you got to coach man-to-man better. We have to play more man-to-man, and you don't always have to play man-to-man without help. You can play man-to-man derivatives where you have lean. You can play 4-man where you have the safeties who can help you quickly. You can play one robber with guys in the middle. I mean, there's a lot of things you can do. And then you play one man, you get up there and press and you bail, and then you match the zone coverage underneath. That's my solution. And coach them better when they are in man-to-man. But if you think that you're going to play modern-day NFL teams and not play a high percentage of man-to-man, you're crazy. And I will also, because, again, as you know, my relationship with Gruden, when he was at Tampa and I was in the division, I used to kid him all the time. I used to say that Tampa 2 was a myth because when the game's on the line, you're playing man-to-man free all day, and it's true. He would admit that. They played – in the year they won the Super Bowl, they were well over 50% man-to-man.
So Rick Venturi via the Andy Moore Automotive Group hotline. All right, look at Kansas City. I know Detroit was close yesterday. Chiefs remain unbeaten. That's who the Colts get next on Sunday Night Football at Arrowhead. What is a major difference from the team that beat the Colts there handily last year compared to this 4-0 start team, especially on the defensive side where they have massive changeover?
Yeah, well, this is, again, when you look at them in the big picture, John, this is, probably the most, not probably it is, it's the most explosive team on offense, which with the best playground quarterback in the game. I mean, the guy is amazing. He's a creator. He can do it all. I tell you what, I go back to 1958. I can remember as a kid at 13 watching Unitas in that greatest game ever played in that last 2-minute drill against the Giants hitting Ray Berry. So I've seen a lot of quarterbacks, and I don't think I've ever seen any better. This kid can do it all. He has a great presence. He can throw it deep. Obviously, moving around, he's phenomenal. So you got that issue. We can get into offense in a minute. Defensively, they've made major changes, but there's really very little. There's very little difference in who they are. I mean, they in what the objective is. Now they've gone from a 3-4. They fired my good friend Bob Sutton after all those years. They put it on him, and they blamed him, and rightfully so. And then they brought in Steve Spagnuolo, who I was with for 2 years in St. Louis. I know Spags extremely well. I know what he does. But at the end of the day, John, they're 29th in defense and 30th against the run and 18th against the score. So, they've made a lot of changes, but they're not a great team. Now, they have a few great individuals, and I think that's where when you get ready to play them, some things that you really have to feel like you got to do. I think number one, I think to win this game, and a lot has to do with the question you're asking me on defense, is we have to dominate the time of possession. We lost the time of possession to them last year in January, 39 minutes to 12 or to 22. So, obviously we can't do that and expect to win the game. This is a game that we have to go in there. We can't go in lethargic like last Sunday. We have to, like we did in January, which we played an awful offensive game also in January. We've got to go and take it to this poor defense right off the bat. I mean, I think you have to set objectives like you have to, basically we've got to say we got to keep it 39 minutes. We've got to make 30 first downs, and we've got to get 31 points. Now, maybe that's a high bar, but I think if you don't do that, you're not setting a bar that you need. You can pound this team. They have one really good player up front in that front four, and that's Chris Jones. Chris Jones is not a great run player. He's going to be the three technique. They're going to be an over defense every single down. You know where he's going to be. You can power double him and run at the ends. Then you come back to the weak side and run at the bubble. Things that are, because everybody's playing over today, the similar characteristics will be there, and you can pound him. Now, pass protection, you better have a good plan for him in that respect. Also, Spagnuolo is vanilla on first down, and he's multiple on third down, and second down is somewhere in between. So you want to keep that ball moving on first down, and you have to have a really good mix. I just talked about those runs, but you have to be able to throw those play actions. They do. This is where they play a lot of cover three, straight zone, and even nickel or base. They play a lot of what we call quarter, half, but it's a little bit more zone. So, the seams are there. You've got to be willing to throw those play actions. Those crosses are there. Quick screens on first down, RPOs, run. You got to keep them off balance on first down. You got to keep it moving. Now, the other really good player in there is Hitchens, a middle linebacker. We talked about getting him a couple years ago. He went from Dallas for big money. He's playing in the middle for them. He is a really good range player, really good football player. But again, you can attack him by making him run and then play, plays against the grain. They've got a pretty good secondary, actually. I think Breland is playing really good. I think he'll get up and press us. He's usually the matchup guy. I would say if Hilton was playing, he'd be on Hilton. The way it goes right now, he may just stay left. I think Ward is their weakness on the right side, number 35. I think if the money's on the table and you have to get a play, you want to go after him. Now they've got two safeties. The young kid Thornhill, who remember he was right at the top of my safeties in the draft. He is a terrific young player with range. He can go get it. High draft pick for them. Outstanding young kid that can do it all. And then the guy you really have to be concerned with is the Honey Badger, Matthew. He's a guy that will be all over the place. He's the strong safety, but he can come down and play a wide out because he's a little bit of a hybrid. They like to blitz him, John. They'll run a couple coverages that are unique. I call it a funny two. They'll get up and make it look like they're in a single high, and then they'll slice to the outside and run a unique kind of two, and then he'll come down and play that deep middle. Not deep middle, kind of that intermediate middle, almost like a robber. So, we know he's a big-time playmaker. He killed us a couple years ago in crunch time. And so I would say, you got to make sure that you have a protection plan when you get into second and long and third and long, because Jones will eat us alive, particularly Glowinski, if we're not careful. That really bothers me in this one because he's a premier guy. He was 15.5 sacks last year. He had a big sack this year, a strip yesterday. He's, like I say, he's not a great run player, but he is a hell of a pass rusher. And if you go back to the playoffs, even though it was a different staff, they attack our right side relentlessly, to be honest with you, relentlessly. And what they'll do is they'll put Jones on Glowinski, and they'll take the kid they got from Seattle, his name number 55,
Frank Clark.
Frank Clark, and they'll put him on Smith and see if he can outrun him to the edge. I'll just tell you right now, that's what's going to happen on third down. And then on third down, you have to be really smart because he does a little bit of everything, and they play a lot of different kind of man-to-man derivative stuff, a lot of two-man, four-man, ones. I mean, a lot of different stuff, all the sugars, all the deltas, all the things we've been talking about. So, that's the challenge. That's not a very good defense if you can stay ahead and count on them, but you have to ball control this game. We can't come in there and do what we did in January and give it up every other down. We have got to maintain that ball for a high percentage of time in this one. Hey,
quickly here, what does their offense look like without Tyreek Hill so far?
Well, they really haven't lost a beat in some ways. I mean, they're right up at the top. I mean, they're one in scoring, 2 total in the pass, number 1. Mahomes is number 2 with an incredible 85.6 QBR. I think with them, it's disorder. I think, first of all, you got to ban the bomb. He makes more deep throws, so you have to play coverages that take the seam, that don't let you run over the top. You don't want to let them have easy plays. And they've gotten guys like Robinson and Hardeman to come in for Tariq, and they've made some big plays. Remember, the funny thing was Andy 3 years ago did not have a touchdown to a wide receiver. Now they're throwing it all over the park with Mahomes. I think the other thing that you got to have, ban the bomb, number 1, the old 60s, the old 60s logo. Ban the bomb. That number 1. Don't let them get cheap plays over the top. Then you have to have a plan for Kelsey. I mean, when the money's on the table, Kelsey is the premier guy in the league. They're going to move him. They're going to put him in the overhang. They're going to get him out there. They're going to put him out there by himself. And if you don't have a plan for Kelsey, then you're just not working at it. Set the edges. We just gave up a 60-yard reverse, for a touchdown. If you remember in the playoff game, we gave up a reverse to Hill, Tariq Hill for a touchdown. So they know our edges are weak. The other thing is they've done a great job of adapting and getting Shady to play. I mean, they lost Damian Williams for a month, but Shady has come in there and he played for him in Philadelphia. He likes playing for him. And McCoy has given him really good football. I mean, and the thing about when I say the edge, McCoy is he doesn't quite have that 6th gear, but he's got 5.5, and he's got great vision. And if you sink that edge, he'll be out there in a second. So, no bombs, plan for Kelsey, protect the edges. And then, I could talk about the flats. They do a lot of things with screens. They use screens like running game. The one thing they don't do the ball very well this year, they just haven't run it as well, although they killed us in the playoff game. But the biggest thing, I think, is you got to keep Mahomes in the tunnel. You have got to squeeze. When Detroit played him best Sunday, and I know that guy's a Belichick disciple, so you always have a 4- and 5-man rush plan that is not just a blitz plan, but a rush plan. And at times they did a really good job of keeping him squeezed in the pocket. What you want to make him throw from the deep well, and that's not to mean that he can't complete them, because he can. But what you don't want him is running in those seams or running outside of that defense, because when he does that, then, buddy, you are in trouble. When he starts extending plays, you can't hold the coverage. I would recommend that all the fans watch the first play of the second half in the Detroit game yesterday, and you will see this playground guy at his best. He scrambles out. He gets out around our right, which is deadly, around our left. He's scrambling. He throws the ball back 35 yards across his body to Kelsey, who by now has gotten open across field. Kelsey catches it, feels the defender, pitches it out, not even planned. This is playground. Pitches it out to Shady, and they get about 60 yards. So what you don't want them in is a playground. You want him squeezed. I'm not as concerned with sacking him. They've got a decent offensive line. If I had to rush on one guy for the game, I think I would rush on the right tackle, Swartz. I don't think he can handle power to move inside. But if you do that, you have to have your inside tackle who will cover you to the edge, because you just don't want this guy on the edge. If you're letting this guy on the edge, or you're giving him big seams to operate in, then again, you haven't done your work.
Rick Venturi, awesome breakdown of the Chiefs right there, and fantastic with what you always do. I knew it was going to be good, considering our back and forth yesterday. So I knew it was. We got a lot of work to do, Rick. A lot of work.
But you know what? One thing I know, I was going to text you today, and then I got carried away on the Chiefs. I was going to text you. The one thing we've done after Sunday's game, we gave them every reason in the world to look beyond us.
There's no doubt about that.
That'll help us.
No doubt about that. As always, awesome, buddy. Thank you.
All right, talk to you later this week, John.
Rick Venturi, you got to hear it each and every week. You just did right here. And 1075thefan.com.